Hi, I'm Sharon Pearson. Welcome to Perspectives. If you're joining the show, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram at sharon.pearson.official. You can send us an email to perspectives@sharonpearson.com. Love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy this week's episode, brought to you by The Ultimate You book, available online and in bookstores. And here's the show. Hey, I'm here today with Katrina Blowers. It's so lovely that you're joining me from Queensland. How are you today?
Good. We have to get this on track because we've been talking for a few minutes before and we've just not stopped laughing. But it is so lovely to be joining you today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. So, Katrina, you have a really interesting story. So the podcast is called Perspectives. And I love getting different people's perspectives on their life, on the world, on how they're doing and how they're making sense of it. And you have a particularly interesting story. Could you share a little bit about yourself so people can get to know you? That would be lovely.
All right. So I'm a newsreader for Channel 7 in Brisbane. I have always wanted to be a journalist ever since I was 7 years old. It's, I suppose, a privilege to know your purpose early on. Yeah. And I've always had that really strong sense that being a journalist, being a communicator has been my purpose. So from the age of 12, I grew up in Canberra and I was doing work experience at the Press Gallery at Parliament House and holding the microphone out the front door, stopping politicians. I just never deviated from this path. Oh. So fast forward to about 3 years ago, and I've been so blessed to have a great career in television, print and radio journalism, and I've covered lots of big events all around the world. So about 3 years ago, I was reading the news on our highest rating night of the week, which is Sunday night. We have around 500,000 people watching that bulletin, no pressure, and it's live. I was going through a divorce at the time, and I suppose I was treating work as a bit of a bubble where, because I love my job so much, I would use that kind of as a crutch to kind of ignore the stress that I was feeling from the rest of my life. And I was really sweeping that stress under the carpet. And as you would probably appreciate, Sharon, with all your years of coaching, stress has a way of manifesting itself in a way that you cannot ignore. And I had a panic attack live on air during the opening titles of the news. And I then had to sit in my seat. I was hosting all on my own. And I had to sit there and do another hour of live television. Oh, wow. So the thing about panic attacks, which I didn't know, is that it's not a one and done situation. You then start to get anxiety about the anxiety. So little things become triggers, such as driving up the mountain. We've got our television station on a mountain here in Brisbane. Driving up the mountain to go to work, I would start getting that feeling again. Walking into the makeup room and sitting in the chair, I would just constantly have all these triggers. And I really contemplated leaving my job because I just didn't know how I was going to get through this. So I was faced with a choice. I could either walk away from this calling that I knew was my purpose, or I could knuckle down and relearn everything that I thought that I knew about confidence. And the thing about confidence is that up until that point, I had thought that it was my superpower. Yeah. I've always spoken on stage since I was a kid. I was in debating teams, public speaking competitions, every play. So it was never something, I just took it for granted. So to then have this fundamental knock to my confidence and have to learn it all over again, it's taken me just over 3 years, but I'm happy to report that I'm back, I'm good now. And now I'm getting to teach other women what I've learned, which is great.
Yeah, wow. So a couple of thoughts came to me. How do you define confidence, firstly? How do you view confidence? Because I think we have two parts to us. We have the certainty that is within us, and then what we project to others is a measure of confidence. Confidence is outward facing. Certainty is inward generating. Do you get the difference?
I absolutely do. And I think a lot of this is something I've come to discover is there's a confidence gap between the genders, and we can talk a little bit more about that later on. But women place a higher degree of importance on competence. So even though I knew that I was competent at my job, I had lost the confidence to perform that or demonstrate that competence outwardly or believe in it within myself. Whereas men, they feel confident even if they don't feel competent doing something.
Yes.
So for me, confidence comes down to being okay with being outside my comfort zone and living a life with no regrets and following my dreams, and knowing that no matter what situation I put myself in, even if it is outside my comfort zone, I'm going to be okay no matter what.
Okay. Why didn't you think that then? Because you did have your dream career, and you did have, literally, it would have been as a 7-year-old when you first dreamt it, you were literally on that Sunday night living your dream.
Yeah.
What was the gap?
Which wasn't ever lost on me, and it still isn't now. I guess I never expected that I would, because the way that my panic attack happened is I had a shortness of breath. I couldn't breathe. My chest just felt incredibly tight. I couldn't talk properly. You know, have you ever had that experience, Sharon, where...
No, I haven't had that, but in front of 500,000, you're doing that in public. I can't even imagine what was going through your mind, the overwhelming thoughts you were having as you were trying to look at an autocue and take instructions from the desk. I just can't imagine.
Yeah, and so when you run up the stairs you can hear your phone ringing, right? And you run up the stairs to grab that phone call, and then you're out of breath, and it's an important phone call, and so you're having to hold it all together. You know, to breathe and talk at the same time.
Yeah.
Situation, even though I'd been sitting at that news desk because we do a lot of checks before we go to sitting there for 10 minutes, I hadn't been moving, but it was as though I had just run a marathon and I was trying to speak normally. And I suppose when you asked me before why it was that I had that big knock to my confidence, even though I knew that I'd sat there and done that job times before, that had never happened to me, and it totally blindsided me. It came seemingly from nowhere. I know now that, of course, it was a result of me sweeping all my stress under the carpet.
Okay.
It seemed to come from nowhere.
So it wasn't related to your job at all. It just decided to present itself at the most inopportune moment in your entire career. That's really what happened. It's like, you're not going to ignore me anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't ignore, and I then couldn't. And that, honestly...
What had you been ignoring? What signs do you mind me asking? What had you been ignoring up to then?
So I'd been going through a divorce, which, even though it on the scale of things was a very amicable divorce, I have 2 children. I have a huge amount of guilt when you separate a family because you feel selfish, you feel that you second guess all of your decisions, and the stress of moving house, of juggling custody of children. It is, for anyone who's been through a divorce, even if you don't have that toxic element of you know, acrimony between you, it still is extremely stressful. So yeah, I think it was a lot of that. I'd just been kind of going on as business as normal. I can deal with this, I can handle this, I don't really need to sit and look at myself too deeply. And that, of course, wasn't right.
And I can imagine you would have felt disappointed that the one place you had as a haven got tipped upside, like the basket, just getting everything in the basket tipped on the floor. The one place where you knew you could count on you, and that's the only person you had to count on, and your body or your mind didn't come through for you that day. That would have been really disappointing is the word I feel, that the one place you went to hide. I mean, you might be doing running. I don't know. You know, you probably have other outlets, but that was the one place you knew you could count on you.
You've nailed it. And also, because I have wanted to do this job for such a long time, it was such an innate part of my identity.
Yeah.
So that was another aspect to this, to have my very identity rocked to the core, caused a huge introspection after that point.
And I don't want to fast forward to the end too much, Katrina, but I'm really interested to know, I imagine the 3 years since then has required you or encouraged you to reflect on what is your identity. Because if we define ourselves by a career, we're really limiting, I know you know this, who we are. So how much of your identity was tied up in being a successful TV personality? Is that the way to say it? Yeah. How much of it tied up versus this other part of your life that wasn't working? I can't even imagine.
Yeah, a lot. And as you rightly pointed out, that wasn't healthy. So this all up was the wake-up call that I needed to have a look at every aspect of my life and the way that I saw myself, not just as Katrina Blowers, the journalist, but, you know, what if that was taken away, which at that stage it was a very real thing for me, because I was starting to get daily anxiety triggered by my job. So I had to look at the big picture of, well, who am I if I am not that? And I need to be comfortable with that as well.
How is it that some people can go through their lives and never have to face that and never have to dig below the surface of how they present to the world? Do you get what I'm saying? There are some people I see, they just seem to have this, never have to self-reflect ever, but maybe they do and I just don't know they're having to do it. But I've been in a situation you've been, I had nothing to do with a panic attack, but a few years ago I had to really face, if I don't have this, who am I? My whole journey for the last 7 years has been attempting, I'm not there yet. You're 3 years in, you say you're comfortable. I'm 7 years in. I'm still not comfortable with the thought of part of my identity being in my success that I've built. I don't know that that's that easy to do.
Look, while I will say that, you know, I feel like I have climbed a really big mountain, I don't think I'm resting on my laurels that I'm definitely there, I've made it. I think it's a daily series of choices that you have to make, and you also have to analyze your thinking around pretty much everything to think, well, okay, what's my motivation behind thinking that? And is that coming from a place of ego, or is that coming from a place of love, or is that coming from a place of fear? I really do have to work at it quite a lot.
I agree. And sometimes I just think, come on, I've got enough character. Stop sending me the challenge. I'm good. Give me a break for 6 months. How much self-awareness did you have of you? Do you believe in self? And now you look back. How much self-reflection did you have going on, or self-awareness do you believe you had going on? Were you reflective or introspective prior to that night on that Sunday night?
Look, I probably thought I was, but I think looking back now, I feel like a completely different person now. And I don't want to look back in judgment at who I used to be, because that got me to where I am today. But I feel a lot more, I feel so much calmer and present. I think calm is the word that I feel now, where I think before I was always very goal oriented. So I was always looking for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, not really stopping to reflect on why I was doing that, whether I was even enjoying doing that, or, you know, stopping to congratulate myself when I achieved anything.
Well, there's the mountain, go climb it. That was my thinking. That's another success I can have, or that's another challenge I can face. And I just used to lean into them with no thought about why. It just seemed the thing to do, because that was the world I'd created for myself. And I thought I was self-aware, Katrina. Goodness, I'm a coach. You'd like to think I'd done, but I was only self-aware to the extent that I could be self-aware. I didn't know what I didn't know to know what I needed to know about the fact that I was just on one path. There were so many other paths. I didn't know.
I love that. And I just love when you said that, because you absolutely don't know what you don't know. So it's difficult to see beyond that sphere when you're in it.
So do you have to have a panic attack, or as I had another type of crisis to get? I mean, that just seems really. I'm not signing up for that.
They say if you
refund.
Spiritual, they say the universe sends you clues, and they're gentle nudges at first, but I think...
And then it's a 4x2, it's like you're going to get the message.
If you're an A-type personality and you also get a lot of external validation, which I always did. I was huge amounts of external validation right from when I was a kid, from receiving, then you follow what's worked before and you don't question that because it's worked for you. It's for me, I needed something big and something to hit me right at the core of what I
think there's some truth to that. I think that I can relate to that. For me, if it hadn't happened, if that bad things hadn't happened back then, I would have justified staying in the hero role and just conquering all, because that was my role. You know, we have different roles. Some of us are the princess, the good girl, the agreeable, whatever. I was the role of the hero, the star. I'd have to be the best and do really well. And to question that was to question who I thought I was. And I think that sounds a little like you, this role of I get accolades for doing well. What do you mean I don't have to do well? And I used to equate it with love. I don't know how deep we can go with this, but I used to equate me coming through for people and always being there and always being capable and competent, and you can count on me. Everything else can go to shit, but you can count on me. I was so wrapped up in that, and I equated it as to why people would be with me. But I had gone worse than that. I don't know if you can relate to this, but I got so good at that when I needed support prior to my crisis, people didn't support me, because I attracted to me people who I could support, that I could come through for. And then when I thought I could do some support, it was a really limited number of people who even knew how to see me as somebody who needs support, particularly family. I'd get comments like, no, you're fine, it's you. You'll always, but no, on the floor, puddle, not coping.
And my family is still very much like that, where I've spoken about this, they're like, no, you're fine. That's you're the achieving one. That's
it. That's it. And it's exhausting, because did you have that moment when you recognize you need to get off that treadmill and the people around you were still thinking you're still going?
Yeah, and that's been one of the upsides, I suppose, of getting a divorce, is you do lose a lot of friends as a result. People do choose sides, and through that process, and in the early days, I found that very painful, because it felt like they were voting with their feet, which they were. But on reflection, they're people who I think I'm better off not having, because they defined who I used to be, and I now want to surround myself with people that I feel are more reflective of who I am now. So yeah, it definitely plays a big part, I think, who you have in your life and in that inner circle.
Do you choose people in your life now differently? That's one of the things I now do really consciously, because if I'm left on automatic, Katrina, I'm terrible at choosing people to have in my life, because I choose people who I know I can play the supportive role for, and I feel totally confident and very safe. But it's not the right, I cannot trust my automatic programming. Where are you with this?
I've very consciously chosen a new partner. I'm very lucky that I've got a new partner in my life who is a really laid back, see, before this, all the partners that I chose were A-types just like me.
Wow.
He's very laid back. He's incredibly in the moment all the time. I have really struggled with in the past is...
There's a watch already.
An area that I've really struggled with in the past is just joy for joy's sake.
Yes.
Playful.
Yeah.
My partner will play hide and seek with his dog just for fun. And I love that about him. He's just a joyous person to be around, and encourages that playful child in me to come out as well.
Did you ever find yourself getting annoyed with it? Because I can do the old pattern and stuff, and then I've got to remind myself, be in the moment. Yeah. But come on.
person.
I can hear myself starting to do it.
Yeah.
It's this conscious break. You know, I'm so proud when I catch myself these days. I'm so relieved when I catch myself wanting to do the old takeover, make it good, fix it because I can mode, and I go into a different groove. It just feels like such a progress for me to actually enjoy the moment for the sake of the moment.
Yeah. And that is, I mean, it's stupid to say that you have to work at having more joy in your life. I have to make space for that. And I have to also feel comfortable that there's not necessarily an outcome or a reason, that it's just joy's sake. And I'm getting better at it. Again, I'm not there, but I'm getting better at it.
Yeah. And now take us back. You had this moment. I don't know how you got through that hour, by the way, when you had no co-host, no one to throw to. I can't imagine what that was like. That hour must have just felt like 6 days. That 1 hour must have felt like it went for weeks. At the end of it, you de-mic, you're walking out. What's on your mind? What's going on for you inside of you when your body and your mind let you down like that, or seem to have let you down like that?
Yeah, the number one emotion I felt was shame. I felt so ashamed. And honestly, that's why it's taken me, I've only just started talking about it publicly, because I felt like I'd really let myself down in the most fundamental way.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't feel like that anymore. I think it's a really, it's a toxic emotion, and it doesn't do you any favors to feel either shame or guilt. It doesn't move the needle forward in any way.
I'm just feeling for the person you were, who was so alone because you're so used to being the hero for others, carrying this secretly because you wouldn't have felt able to share with others that you're human, because this doesn't happen to Katrina. That's not the operating system I'm working with. So did you keep it to yourself, or?
So there were some people at work who knew, because we have people in the control room who are communicating with me via an earpiece. And because I was reading the headlines and then the camera comes to me and I say, good evening, and then I read the first story, I knew that in order to get off camera, which is, I just wanted to rip off my microphone and my earpiece and get out of that studio.
Yes, of course.
Was going in my mind was, do not become a YouTube sensation. Don't become one of those people who goes viral on YouTube. So I knew that I had to fluff my way through. So I said, good evening. I had 4 paragraphs to read. I read the first sentence of the first paragraph and the last sentence of the last paragraph. So it made no sense whatsoever. But I knew that that was the cue for the director to roll the first story so that I could have some space.
Well done.
Me, what happened? Did the autocue fail? And I said, no, I think I've had a panic attack. And they were just beautiful, and they helped me breathe, and they checked in with me after every story, and they said, are you okay? We'll bring you some more water, you know, and they basically propped me up right through that bulletin. But yeah, I did feel too ashamed to tell anyone. I didn't tell my news director. I didn't tell other journalists. I just tried to muddle through on my own. And I think perhaps that's why it took me a good 3 years to get back on track. And to lose those feelings of shame as well.
Well, shame loves shadows. The more we keep our vulnerabilities to ourselves, the less we're going to heal, which I'm sure has been your journey. So who was the first person? We don't need to know who it was, but can you remember the moment you started talking about your vulnerability to somebody?
Yeah, so it was actually my partner, who I just mentioned to you, and I was so embarrassed that I didn't tell him for 2 days.
Oh, wow.
When he was just lovely about it, that made me feel like it was okay to talk about it a bit more. I then told one of the makeup artists at work, and she was incredible. And then as I started to open up more and more, it was funny how many other people then revealed that they had also had panic attacks, or that they had had similar experiences of feeling completely at sea about something. I decided that instead of saying no and shrinking back, it would be the old get back on the horse approach. So I decided, because I know that I'm pretty tough, I decided that I would say yes to every speaking opportunity that came my way. I actually had one more panic attack while I was on stage in front of a crowd of 1,000 people, and that was horrible. But I then spoke in front of 5,500 people last year in Brisbane, and I felt pretty good.
Yeah. So what's been the process? Can you walk us through? I know there will be people right now watching this or listening to this having to ask, how did you turn this around? Firstly, there was the desire. That's come through really clearly. That was not going to define you. I've got that message, that moment wasn't going to define you. You were going to define you. So what was the process for you?
So a big realization early on was that just me making a decision to change wasn't enough. And that was, you know, that ran parallel to or ran counter to everything that I'd done up until that point, because me deciding to do something used to be enough. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to be scared anymore. I'm just going to be confident and walk into that studio and everything will be fine. And actually, that's not what happened at all. So I had to get really comfortable with feeling nervous for the first time and having stage fright. So I lent heavily into the research because I thought science has to have an answer. Yeah. Journalist, I love research, I love facts, I love evidence-based strategies. So I looked at all the research surrounding, first of all, stage fright. I went to see a psychologist who deals, her specialty is dealing with actors who have had stage fright, and we started to go through strategies for, you know, recognizing where you feel fear in your body, becoming attuned to that. And there are things that you can do to dissipate that cortisol or that adrenaline. One of them is by movement, so that if you, on the day of a big performance, or for me, reading the news, I would go to the gym and do a really heavy workout. When I was sitting at my news desk and I started to feel those butterflies in my stomach, I would swing my legs under the desk, or I'd turn from side to side, of course, before the camera was on me.
Fantastic.
Could do to dissipate that nervous energy. I also started meditating every day because I read that you can get the same endorphin hit that you get from an hour at the gym by meditating and becoming really present with your thoughts. And that is another way of, when you get the fear and when you start to get that negative self-talk of, I can't do this, everyone's looking at me, everyone can tell that I'm nervous, yeah. You can hold that thought in a really impassive way, and you can think to yourself, okay, there's that thought. Is that really true for me? Is that going to help me in this situation right now?
So that's a little bit of cognitive behavioural therapy as well. Which was some of the journey you took?
Yeah.
Is that true? Is it completely true? And is there something else that could be true?
Analyzing all the stories that I had been telling myself up until that point. You know, we mentioned about the achieving, about the self-validation and self-worth, and really leaning into those stories and figuring out whether they held true for me, for the place that I was in right now.
What was it like having to start answering those questions? Because we can ask that question ourselves and then get busy doing the washing up. So what was it like to sit, you know what I mean, that distraction strategy? I'm busy, I'll deal with many of my life later. What was it like to really sit with answering the question?
So Sharon, you nailed it before when you said my desire was so strong, and I'm really lucky that I have such a big driver. So yeah. I made an appointment with myself every single day. So I set my alarm for 5:30. I meditate, first thing that I do every day, and then I journal. And that's where I do ask myself all of those big questions. Right. Things. So it's something that, you know, the kids are still asleep. So often that can be an excuse for not having the time. And it's the first thing that I do every day. The other thing that I do is I've really looked into the science of body language and how by holding powerful, confident postures, it sends a signal to your brain that you are more confident than perhaps you're feeling. And these are things that I was already doing as a television presenter, because we get taught how to stand, how to hold our hands, what to do with hand gestures in order to look warm and approachable and trustworthy on screen. And so, holding a power pose, as I'm sure you've heard, for 2 minutes, psychologists have actually found that people who do that feel much more powerful. They're able to think more creatively. They're able to identify patterns that they wouldn't have been able to identify before. So the whole body language piece plays a really important part, and I've become much more mindful of how I carry myself.
It also releases different chemicals in the brain, because when we do that, we're communicating to our mind how we feel, so the body matches it with, because feelings are just chemicals in the brain, and it releases a match to that. Did you do the thing, one of the things that I've done and been working on here, I am the high achiever, that's just terrible language. I can hear myself saying it, like, here it is. I'm working hard at this, I'm working hard at the joy, is sitting with because mine isn't panic attack, but mine can be anxiety around, I think, belonging maybe, or something around when there's anxiety if I need to be the hero. I'm very addicted to wanting to be the hero. What I'm doing is sitting with the feeling and saying to myself, it's okay to feel the way I'm feeling. Don't deny myself the feeling, because every emotion is true to every human being. And if we deny an emotion, we're denying an aspect of ourselves. And I was an expert at denying aspects of me. So me sitting with fear or sitting with anxiety or discomfort or sadness has been really important for me, I believe, in this journey of reclaiming me. Have you, I imagine you've done a version of that as well?
Yeah, my psychologist was the first one to tell me that this was even a thing. She said that we all have shadows that we need to sit with and be okay with. At first, I found that very confronting, because I've always been I'm okay, everything's okay, think positive, look on the bright side. But it has been incredibly insightful to sit with the shadow and not wallow, but look at picking apart, well, why is it that I feel that way, and what is that motivated by? And that's led to some really big breakthroughs.
I tend to sit with it and validate it. It's okay that I'm feeling sad right now. Sharon, you can feel sad. Because I used to deny myself sadness, anger, and disappointment. That were the 3 emotions I just was banned from doing, because you can't be heroic and never be angry. So it's okay to feel that way. Sit with how you're feeling. Be okay feeling that way. And again, it's not about the wallowing. And then accept it. And by accepting it and validating it, it didn't need to be denied. And because it wasn't denied, I felt more whole. And I can't even explain why, but it just really helped me be more me. I'm now less self-conscious not being heroic, which to me is just fabulous.
Absolutely. And I will say that for me, a really big breakthrough has been learning that confidence is not the absence of fear. So I now know that I can feel fearful or feel nervous or feel like an imposter in some situations, but still be confident. And it's having the duality of those emotions or feelings and being okay with both.
I love that. I'm studying a master's of positive psychology, and I think one of the things I'm finding really disappointing about it is that they're only focused on what they label a positive emotion, but I consider every emotion having a positive intent, including my sadness or my disappointment or my hurt or my vulnerability. I label them all positive. Yeah. Sometimes for the sake of semantics, I'm going to say the darker emotions, as you say, the shadow, but they're all as valid and all deserve the light as much as any others. But pos psych doesn't do it. And to me, that's the negative of pos psych. Well, come on, it's all valid and it all makes me my humanity. Bring it all into the light. So I think we've got a long way to go in the sciences blending this conversation.
Oh my gosh, I'm loving this chat so much, Sharon. This is amazing.
Me too. So you have, as a result of it, taken things in a really interesting direction. And this wasn't part of your dream when you were a 7-year-old. So it's called claiming your confidence. You went on this internal journey. I see so many parallels with you and I, and this isn't to take away from your experience, but I really identify with, I redefined how I teach what I teach based on how I grew. So I always teach that which I'm doing. And you seem to have done that as well.
They say that you teach what you most need to learn. And I think definitely in my case, that's what happened. So for me, as part of my job as a news presenter, I get asked to facilitate panels, speak at big events. I'm very fortunate that I get to go on stage and be part of so many big events. So I said yes, as I mentioned, to a lot of things in order to try and get back on the horse, so to speak, which, you know, it did work. That exposure therapy, it does work. But you
well, exposure therapy is only little pieces of it, Katrina. I don't think you did little steps. I don't think 500,000 people is a little step. I'm just saying, your psychologist might see things differently, but aren't you meant to start with 2 people?
So what really struck me after, because I do a lot of events where a lot of women go to these events, and women would come up to me afterwards, and this was when I was really in the trenches working this stuff out, and they would come up to me and they would say to me, "You are so confident on stage. What is your secret? I wish that I could be as confident as you are." And that led to me doing a little bit of one-on-one work with some female CEOs, which, you know, at the time I thought, I'll just teach them how to look good on camera. I'll teach them
media training,
fiction and public speaking.
Yeah.
But really, what struck me so much is that these were women who had risen to the top of their field, and yet still they were plagued by the same self-doubt and insecurity that I was struggling with. So I thought there's something to this, and there's something to the fact that women seem to grapple with confidence much more than men do. So that led to me being asked to do a corporate workshop, and that was really well received. And then using...
Well, hang on, slow down. You did a corporate workshop. How much of it was the internal journey versus the obvious media training that you would be expected to be hired for? What was the balance there?
So I decided, that was the very first time that I decided to go public with my story.
Good on you. Good on you.
Yeah, and the CEO of that particular organisation, which was a big international accounting firm, it was a man, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, "I've never told anyone this story, but the only reason I moved into accountancy was because I used to be a pilot. I had a terrible landing where we crash landed into some trees. That was my dream, being a pilot. I then got a panic attack when I was meant to get behind the controls the next night, and I never flew again." Oh. And that is a big regret of mine, that I didn't work harder in overcoming that lack of confidence and that anxiety. So he said, "My hat's off to you." And I just thought, if I can show other people that it is possible to work through this, confidence is a muscle that you can build. You just need to know the right techniques. You don't have to live a life of regret. That's a huge value of mine. I don't want to get to the end of my life. Anything.
That, I think, is one of my prime drivers. If I'm wondering how to play the game of life, how am I going to look back on this moment? Am I going to regret that I held back? Or am I going to really, come on, have a go, have a story to tell, rather than no story to tell because I said no. That just drives me. The saying on my computer at home, let me get it right because it faded out recently and I haven't seen it for a while. It's, you know who you truly are in your last breath, because that's the moment you realize all the person you could have been, and it's too late to change it. And I'm like, shit, come on, don't get to your last breath, see who you could have been, and there's a gap. I want to close that gap. And I think a huge part of it, Katrina, is vulnerability. Is that a conversation that's coming up? Because shame and vulnerability are like two sides of a coin to me. The shame loves the shadows, and to be vulnerable isn't to be weak. And I think a lot of women somehow mess up that vulnerability is weakness. But vulnerable, and men too, vulnerability is the strength to be intimate and open in a moment where it's a risk. And it's so much easier to shut it down and have the regret. So how much talking now do you do on that kind of world, or you may have your own language for it?
So I still struggle with the vulnerability hangover that I get when I share my story in a new forum for the first time. So I did some charity work for Lifeline a couple of weeks ago, and I was in the Courier Mail, did a feature on me, and that was the first time I had told my story to the papers. And that for the rest of that day, you just feel, oh goodness, I've really put myself out there and overshared. But every time you do that, it's okay, and you usually get a lot of support for it.
Is that new to you, to get support for being vulnerable? Because that was a whole new world for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, we've spoken about this already. You get validation for being the strong one, for being the achiever. So to get validation for being vulnerable, and I guess how I would have looked at it before for showing my weaknesses, which I don't see it that way now.
Yeah.
Is a whole new thing. And the other thing, speaking of vulnerability, Brené Brown has this beautiful quote which now drives me, and she says that courage is contagious. And I really believe that by showing my courage to other women, I hope that some of that can rub off where they need that.
The way I take that saying is vulnerability is contagious. Vulnerability gives people around us permission to take the risk emotionally. And so the way you were doing it with the stories you're sharing of what people say to you, your vulnerability, the courage you're showing in taking that risk and being vulnerable, is giving others permission to get in touch with what they've denied in themselves. That is contagious. That is healing. It's really profound. Now, one of the things I wanted to chat with you about was in claiming your confidence. We talked about this just before we came on air. You have a program for younger teenagers. Can you share, would you like to share a little bit about, I know it's fully booked out. Congratulations, it's fantastic. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I think we share some of our same concerns about teenagers and social media. Anyway, over to you.
Yeah, so I have a 12-year-old daughter, so that's where this stems from. And I looked at what was being offered to her at her school, and it is fear-based, which I totally get. It's very scary, the world of social media. So they were being taught things like how to stay safe and avoid internet predators, all extremely worthy education tools for them. But there was nothing out there. And being in the media for a long time, I've interviewed a lot of high profile celebrities and other people who have got people who manage their reputations in the online space. So they're people who do that for them, and they're very mindful of what they're putting out into the world. And we're essentially giving our kids, some as young as 12, broadcasting platforms. It's the new CNN, it's the new ABC, but we're giving them no tools or even a discussion around, well, you're putting your story out into the world. How much do you want to share? What is the long-term implication of this? And what do you want to say about yourself? So I come at it from a positive perspective of, well, I showcase a lot of people who are, 16, 17 years old and have used their online platforms to promote either worthy causes, or they've created careers for themselves. There's a vegan chef that I have. There's a photographer. So I show them how to utilize their platforms for good.
And so one of the things we were sharing off camera was parents have no idea what their 12-year-old is doing in this day and age on social media. My greatest fear is the part of the brain that teenagers go, as you know, through a stage in life. Teenagers go through a stage in life, well, of course they do. But the stage of life they're in when they're a teenager, their self-consciousness is so high that they actually unconsciously believe that others can read their mind and see their shame.
Yeah.
So your 12-year-old, when they come home, if they're mad on snap at you, there's a very good chance it's because something embarrassing happened at school and they assume you are shaming them by asking them about their day. That's how sensitive their brains are to being in public. And then we put my policy is I'm banning it. If I'm queen for a day, which I'm really anticipating is going to happen soon, just after cocktails at 6 p.m, my last action is to shut down adult social media to everybody under the age of 16.
Love that. And over 16 too. Oh gosh.
And for me.
And that's the thing. So we talk a lot I do workshops, and we talk a lot about what I call comparisonitis. And
yes.
I talk about how I, as an adult, and I have interviews with Ariane Titmus, who's a gold medal winning swimmer, and Jeff Horn, who's a boxer who has suffered the most horrendous internet trolling. And we also have interviews with Jessica Alba. She had a mental breakdown and had to go to hospital, and she took 2 years off social media. And she says that the reason for that is largely due to being out there so much and having lost control of her identity in that online space and comparing herself to other people. And so Jessica Alba is Selena Gomez. That's what I've thought of. Selena Gomez. So if someone like Selena Gomez is doing that and comparing herself to other people, then seriously, what hope do 12-year-old girls have? It's a very sophisticated mindset that you need when you're scrolling through other people's perfectly curated feeds to be able to sit back and say, is this reality or is this just a construct?
I don't think their brains are capable of it. I'm whatever age I am, and I'm only just getting capable. I don't think I'm capable of detaching from the fact that that's perfectly curated and best foot forward every single day. I still get FOMO, and I'm old enough to know better, and my logic brain tells me I should know better, and I read the science on it, and I still get caught in FOMO. Why aren't I in Italy at that dinner party? How does a 16-year-old handle this? So would you join me if I'm queen for a day? It's cocktail hour, and then at 7 p.m, we're voting. You don't really have a voting right. It really is I am the queen. But would you support me in turning off social media for any young brain, at least until they're old enough to, have sex? Can we make that standard the same?
I would love that. And I look back at how I would have been if I had access to social media. Yeah. But
I would have been trolled. I was such a dag. I would have been trolled. I would have been capable of trolling, but I would totally have the first ever trolls in internet history. I would have helped them be invented.
Oh my gosh. But one of the things we talk about in our workshop is we try and do switch off Sunday, where we have a week where we commit to just, even if it's for 1 hour, which is a big deal for some teenagers.
Yes.
Having 1 hour of mindfulness, or a whole day preferably, switching off the phone. And
you need to get into the schools and get a school policy banning social media during school hours.
Yeah.
That's your next life.
The other thing is that, unfortunately, the states won't step in and legislate around that. They say it's up to each principal. So each principal has the choice with what they do with their social media policy. And that's where you were talking about parents needing to know what their children are doing. Parents also need to become more actively engaged around choosing schools that support what they believe social media policies to be.
I think it's as vital to choose a school for a child where there is an active, proactive, kind social media policy as any other criteria. Because I don't know how we're ever going to stop the cycle we're in if we don't stop bullying online, and it starts then. Today's bully, tomorrow's troll. If we don't stop the cycle and demonstrate something better. But now I'm saying that, it's really down to us. I mean, if Donald Trump can troll, everyone's going to troll. Yeah, I'm not helpful with this conversation. I'm just going to be queen and fix it.
I support that.
Thank you. So what's the risk? How is it helping them? So, you know, my concerns, I think you share them around young people being it. Given they're going to be there, how is this, what is it giving them that they didn't have before?
So I had to find a way to appeal to teenagers, because if I just came in and shook my finger at them and told them they're going to regret everything that they're doing right now, they'll just switch off. So my way in is the whole seeing themselves as a brand and reputation management, having that celebrity angle where celebrities are also sharing the messaging that I want to push with them, and showing them how to make their feed look really beautiful, and for them to get more attention in the online space, but for things that they actually want to promote and that their future self will be proud of. So I see them, their eyes light up when I talk about that and when I showcase what other teenagers have done. I mean, kids are just wanting attention, but shift it from, you know, things that could come back to bite them to things that will open up doors for them in the future.
How capable are they thinking about their future selves?
They're actually more sophisticated, I think, now than potentially we were when we were.
That's not bad. You just set the benchmark pretty low.
I think because they're exposed to a lot more than we ever were, that they're used to having those big picture thoughts and ideas. And they also, when you show them, we have a segment in the workshop of Instagram versus reality, and there's a lot of great influencers out there who are being very truthful about what it takes to produce the perfect, so-called perfect picture or perfect post. So we show them all of that and all the bells and whistles, and we say it's okay to feel inadequate, because it's natural that you will when you look at a picture like this. That here's how you can make your best self stand out online, and here's how, if you're thinking about moving in a certain direction, you can get attention for all the right reasons.
Yeah, I still can't help but think what you're doing is vital if they're going to be there, but I need more parents. I just need to be queen. I need to get more parents involved in managing this. So I have a friend, it's all anecdotal, but I have a friend and she thought she'd button down social media access. She didn't have your course and certainly didn't have the sophistication for it. She's 13. She literally had an older man grooming her.
Yeah.
And she thought it was a young boy being friends with her. She was incapable of assessing the difference in the situation. She then had another boy who was 16 become friends with her offline and on, and she started meeting with him. She's 13 and not sophisticated. She's a me 13, the dag who's still running around, you know. Greece was big. I'm older than you, but Greece was big when I was 13, and every single young girl in my class wore the Grease pants that Olivia Newton-John wore, except for me. I turned up in tracksuit. That's your measure of sophistication. Well, my friend's daughter's there, and she went and met with this boy secretly, and I thought, how are we ever going to help them learn to make mistakes safely if mistakes are made in public? And it's terrifying to me that they don't understand they're having a conversation with strangers eavesdropping, and I don't like strangers eavesdropping. I think so much about what I say in public.
I think a lot of parents and a lot of my female friends who have daughters who are 12 and 13, unfortunately, they look at things like TikTok or Snapchat. I mean, most of them have got their heads around things like Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. But TikTok is where it's at right now for those that age group, right? And you actually have a responsibility as a mum or a dad to not put your head in the sand about this stuff, to have conversations with your kids about, you know, not in a preachy way, but in just get them to show you the kinds of things that they're looking at in an interested, engaged way. Learn as much as you can about it. Try and see it through a positive lens as much as you can, instead of watching it with so much fear and anxiety. because it is a really innovative, creative space and an amazing way to broadcast your talents to the world or get job opportunities or connect with people. I've connected with so many amazing people in that space. So I think you've got to shift your thinking about this.
Oh, I'm so old school, Katrina. I get what you're saying, and logically I get it, but I have this visceral response because I'm from the dark ages. I'm from the age of the horse and cart, so I'm still trying to work out how to wind up electricity. Given this is the world we're growing up with, we could do an entire conversation on what this generation will expect of their world in their 20s. What they expect of an employer, what they expect of the world, what they expect as a consumer. Yeah. Because they have instant right now to an extent that you and I, we had to organize a phone call. Do you remember this? It was a phone and you had to queue to use the phone. That's me. So they get to have it now in private. I never had any of that private.
No, and can I just tell you a really quick story? So another thing about social media, of course, is to make sure that it never substitutes human connection, because that is incredibly important. So, you know, we have a policy in my home of no phones or devices at tables, whether you're at a restaurant or you're at home. We look each other in the eye and we all go around and ask each other about our day. I recently did a story at the Queensland Police Academy where they were trialling new de-escalation techniques, and that's a fancy way of saying that instead of police instantly getting out their guns or their tasers, that they would look the alleged offender in the eye, they would ask them their name, they would introduce themselves, and they would talk to them about whatever the problem was or what they were feeling in an effort to de-escalate that situation. And the senior police officer who was talking to me about this said that the new wave of recruits coming through now, he's never seen anything like it, because this is the generation that's grown up with screens. They have a real problem with looking people in the eye and talking to them for a length of time because they're just not used to it. So
they don't know what to calibrate. They don't know if they looked you in the eye, they wouldn't know what cues they should be calibrating. One of the saddest things I see when I go to cafes, eventually, but when I go to cafes and I'll see parents with a toddler who can't walk have a screen for the entire 2-hour lunch, I could weep. I could weep that toddler is learning eye contact with a screen and doesn't have to have eye contact. So there's nothing there. This eye contact thing is the whole nurturing part of the brain, the compassionate part of the brain, the interest in others part of the brain. None of that's being developed because the whole lunch, when they should have been interacted with and be a problem, learn how to manage themselves, all the things that are being learned, it's all taken off the table because this kid just stares for 2 hours at the cartoon. I'm stopping that as well, if that's okay.
I'm behind you on that one too.
Yeah, thank you. Now, what's for you now? You don't just do claiming your confidence for younger people, you also do it for adults as well. What do you do in that space?
Yeah, so I have an online course which I launched earlier this year, which has techniques that I used to, you know, claim my confidence again. Yeah. And I do in-person workshops. But Sharon, I have to be so mindful of my time because I do have this great passion which has come out of this terrible experience, but what a gift. But I also am still working as a news presenter and I love that job too. And I'm the mother of 2 children. So I'm being very mindful about how I'm devoting my time. But an online course is a great way to still get that information out there and to not have to be physically there to share it.
And what's your perspective on life since that Sunday? How has your perspective on yourself and your life shifted in that time?
I actually feel like I'm capable of so much more. It has made me feel both vulnerable, getting back to the shadow, both vulnerable and like I can move mountains.
Yeah.
And it's made me, I think, not only a better mother, but a much better journalist because I can really empathise with that lack of confidence and lack of self-belief and I'm usually meeting people on their worst days when I'm doing stories with them. And I think it's given me so much more empathy.
And slowing down feels really good, doesn't it? Taking time out to feel what you're feeling and be with you. I should have been told this years ago. I didn't need a crisis to be shown. Yeah, I did. Never mind. I'm totally kidding myself right now. The delusion is strong in me. I wish. Thank you so much for your time. You've been so generous and you've been so open. It's just been delightful. Every part of the conversation I've thoroughly enjoyed. I'm really grateful to you.
Me too. I've loved our chat. It's been so delightful getting to know you a bit better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your openness. I really trust that people who hear this there'll be so many people hearing this who can relate to this, and they'll be so gratified to know that the person who presents so beautifully and perfectly as they're meant to on stage, on camera, human, vulnerable, dealing, and still living their dream. That message to me is everything. We never have our shit together as we live our dream. No, we don't. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.